The market settled into afternoon. Customers came and went. The light shifted the way it does in Busan in the late morning, going from sharp to warm, hitting the fabric bolts and making the colors richer. Isi was in the middle of a detailed analysis of a property dispute she'd read about. She had opinions, structured and argued, which she was delivering to Kang with the confidence of someone who expected to be taken seriously and had never been given a reason to expect otherwise, when she noticed he was smiling. Not almost. Not adjacent. Actually smiling. She stopped mid-sentence. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "You're smiling. People smile." "You don't," she said. "Not really. Not like that." He looked at her. "Maybe I'm practicing something new." She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned back to her newspaper. "The property dispute," she continued, as if nothing had happened. "The defendant's claim rests on a 1987 precedent that was partially overturned in 2003. Are you following?" "Every word," he said. And the market moved around them, and the light moved through the fabric, and the photograph on the shelf caught it and held it, and 3 people sat at a stall that sold things from 2 worlds and had become, without anyone formally deciding, the place where a family had found each other. Not all at once. In pieces. The way the best things do. Some families don't find each other all at once. They return in pieces. If this story stayed with you, if you watched all the way here, that means everything. Hit the like button. Leave a comment telling me which part hit hardest. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this one coming. Stories that don't let go. He'd say thank you, she said. And then he'd tell you that you still have time. He believed that. That there was always still time to do the right thing. She paused. I believe it too. The market began to fill around them. Vendors arriving. Crates being opened. The particular percussion of a market morning, wood and metal and voices and wheels on stone. Adaora came through the curtain. Stopped when she saw Kang was already there. Looked at the 2 of them, her daughter and this man who had been a ghost in the margins of their lives and was learning, slowly, painfully, to be something less absent. She sat down. Poured tea from the flask she brought out every morning now. 3 cups, automatic, without discussion. "Ezi," she said. "Tell him about the case." Ezi looked up. "Which case?" "The one you were explaining yesterday. The legal one. The constitutional argument." Ezi looked at her mother. Her mother was looking at Kang. Kang was looking at Adaora with an expression that was 3 things at once: surprised, grateful, something without a clean name that lived in the territory between those 2. "Okay," Ezi said, turning to Kang with the focused energy of someone who had been waiting for permission to continue. "So, the defendant's legal team made a critical error in the 3rd filing. Are you ready? Because this is where it gets interesting." "I'm ready," Kang said. And Adaora sat on her crate with her tea, looking out at the market, and the edge of her mouth moved in the direction of something she hadn't let herself do in a long time. The final morning arrived the way final mornings do, without announcing itself. It was ordinary. That was the thing. It was completely ordinary. Kang came through the north entrance. The market was loud and alive and indifferent. Mrs. O looked up at 5 minutes to 9 and greeted him first, as she always did now, and he returned it with the full formality she deserved, as he always did now. He walked to the stall. Ezi was already there. Yellow dress, a new one, brighter than the original, a birthday gift from Adaora 3 weeks ago. Sitting on her crate with something she was reading, a newspaper folded to the legal section. She looked up when he arrived. "Posture?" she said by way of greeting. He sat down, spine straight, and looked at her. She assessed him. Nodded once. "Better." Adaora brought tea. "Set it down." Saturday. The 3 of them occupied their corners of the small space with the ease of people who have learned each other's habits, who know not to crowd, who know when to speak and when to let the silence be what it is. The market moved. A child ran past. Mrs. O made a sale. Somewhere distant a vendor was singing. Ezi set down her newspaper. "Kang Joon-seo," she said. "Yes. I've been thinking about what you said. About my father. About practicing presence." She looked at him. "Have you practiced enough to know what this is now?" He looked at her. At 8 or. At the photograph on the shelf, permanent now, uncontested, part of the stall's furniture in the way that only things that belong somewhere eventually become. Yes, he said. What is it? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, family, he said. I think. Easy Eye nodded, satisfied. Not surprised. The nod of someone whose hypothesis has been confirmed by the data. Good, she said. Because I've decided that too. And once I decide something, it's decided. Aurora, behind her teacup, made the sound again. The short involuntary sound adjacent to something warmer. She pressed her lips together. Looked at the market. Kang looked at her. She looked back. Something passed between them, not resolution exactly, not the clean conclusion of a story. Something more honest than that. The acknowledgement that grief doesn't close, that history doesn't simplify, that two people can be connected through a loss and find, on the other side of it, something that isn't replacement but is its own true thing. It wasn't easy. It wouldn't always be easy. But it was real. And real was enough. Some time passed. And this time the compression in his voice broke slightly at the edges. Not dramatically, not in any way the market would have noticed. But Easy Eye noticed. She noticed the way she noticed everything. And she let it be there without rushing to cover it. They sat with it. After a moment, Aurora came through the curtain with 2 cups of tea. She set one in front of Kang without comment, sat on the third crate with her own, and looked out at the market. 3 people. 1 stall. The photograph on the shelf behind them catching the morning light. Nobody said anything important for a while. It turned out nothing important needed to be said. Weeks became a month. The month turned at its edges and became something settled. Kang's presence at the stall had stopped being news in the market. Mrs. O no longer looked like she might faint when he greeted her. She had begun, cautiously, to greet him first, and once had offered him a small ceramic piece which he had accepted and which now sat, as far as anyone knew, somewhere in the life he lived outside the market. Vendors who had rerouted themselves around him for months had begun to include him in the ordinary traffic of their day. Not warmly, not all of them, but without the specific terror that had characterized the early weeks. He had not become someone different. This was important. Easy Eye had never been trying to make him someone different. She had been doing something more precise than that. She had been insisting, relentlessly, by example and by instruction and by the particular force of her refusal to treat him as what everyone else said he was, that the person underneath the version the world had built was real and present and worth addressing directly. It was working. Not in the way of transformation stories. Not the clean arc where a dangerous man is redeemed by innocence and emerges remade. Real things don't work that way. He was still who he was. He still walked into rooms and changed their temperature. His associates still waited at the market entrance like furniture when he was at the stall. The north end of Busan still moved according to his decisions. But there was a room now, in the geography of his days, where none of that applied. Where a child questioned his posture and a woman set tea in front of him without ceremony and a photograph of 20 years ago sat on a shelf catching light. He was practicing presence. He was, slowly becoming that shape. On the last Tuesday of the month, Easy Eye came to the stall in the morning and found Kang already there. He was never there before her. She had always arrived first. She stopped at the entrance to the stall and looked at him, sitting on his crate, hands resting on his knees, looking at the photograph on the shelf with an expression he hadn't bothered to compose because he hadn't known she was watching yet. She had never seen his face completely unguarded before. It was different. Younger, somehow. Like the 20 years of deliberate construction had temporarily stepped aside and what remained was something closer to the boy in the photograph, uncertain, open, sitting with something large that he didn't know how to hold. She walked in. He heard her. The composition returned, not completely, not as fully as it once would have. But it settled back into place like a habit. "You're early," she said. "I couldn't sleep," he said. She sat across from him. "What were you thinking about?" He looked at the photograph. "Him," he said. Simply. She nodded. "Me too sometimes," she said. "I think about the things I would tell him. If I could." At this child who had been born carrying 2 worlds in her face, who had grown up watching her mother hold grief with both hands and keep walking, who had somehow distilled all of this into a clarity that cut cleanly through every complicated thing and arrived at the simple true center of it. "When did you get so old?" Eudora said, quietly, almost to herself. "I've always been old," Izzy said. "You made me that way." Eudora made a sound, short, involuntary. Not quite a laugh. Adjacent. She pressed the photograph against her chest briefly, the way you hold something you're not ready to put down, then set it carefully on the shelf behind the stall where the good things were kept. Kang arrived 20 minutes later. He greeted Mrs. O, walked to the stall, sat down. Easy Eye watched him settle. She watched him look at the shelf where the photograph now sat, visible, propped against a bolt of fabric. He looked at it for a moment and then looked away, at the market, and said nothing. Easy Eye said nothing either. They sat for a while in the particular silence that exists between people who have said the important things and are now simply inhabiting what those things have built. Then, "I've been thinking," Easy Eye said. "About what?" "About you," she said. "About what comes next." He looked at her. "What do you mean?" She held up one finger. "You've been coming here for almost 2 months. You've gotten better at greetings." A second finger. "You've improved your posture about 40%. A third. "You've eaten more different foods than you probably have in years." She lowered her hand. "But none of that is the real thing." "What's the real thing?" "The real thing," she said, "is that you've been alone for a very long time. And you've been using the work and the control and she gestured vaguely at all of him, the dangerousness as a reason to stay alone. Because if you're dangerous, you can't be close to people. And if you can't be close to people, you don't have to feel the things that come with being close to people." Kang was very still. "I'm 9, she continued. "And even I can see that's exhausting." He looked at her. "My father is gone," she said. "That's fixed. Nothing changes it. But you're here. And we're here. And that's not nothing." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not saying it fixes anything. I'm saying it's something." A long silence. "Easy Eye," he said. "Yes. You are the most unusual person I have ever met." "I know," she said without vanity. "Factually. It's because I'm 2 things at once. I see from 2 angles. Most people only see from one." She tilted her head. "You should try it." "Try what?" "Seeing from a different angle," she said. "You've spent 20 years seeing yourself as someone who has to stay outside. Try seeing yourself as someone who is allowed to come in." He looked at her for a long moment. Then at the photograph on the shelf. Then at the curtain through which Eudora moved in and out, the ordinary traffic of her day, which had begun to include him as a feature of its landscape. "Your father," he said slowly. "He used to say something. When we were young and I was already moving toward things I shouldn't have been moving toward." He paused. He said, "You become the shape of what you practice. If you practice distance, you become a distant shape. If you practice presence, you become." Oh, who had by now fully incorporated this into the liturgy of her day and would look up from her ceramics at 5 minutes to 9 with the particular readiness of someone expecting something they've decided to trust. He still sat on the second crate. Easy Eye still critiqued his posture, questioned his choices, and offered him food he now no longer refused. But Eudora was there too. Not always at the stall. She had inventory, suppliers, the ordinary machinery of running a business. But she no longer disappeared entirely behind the curtain. She moved in and out. Sometimes she sat on the third crate for 20 minutes between tasks, drinking tea, not always speaking, not requiring speech. Sometimes she and Kang exchanged words about practical things. The market's upcoming inspection, a supplier who was giving her trouble with delivery timelines, a vendor 2 stalls down who had been making noise about expanding into her space. On these practical things, Kang was useful in ways that operated below visibility. Problems that Eudora mentioned in passing tended to resolve before she raised them a second time. She did not ask how. He did not explain. This had its own language and they were both fluent in it. Easy Eye observed all of this with the focused satisfaction of someone watching a plan execute correctly, despite not having consciously made the plan. She had simply been herself, relentlessly, consistently, undefendably herself, and this had somehow arranged the world into a better shape than it had been in before. She found this instructive. On a Thursday morning, 5 weeks after Kang's return from his disappearance, Easy Eye arrived at the stall early and found something on the table. A photograph. She almost picked it up immediately, then stopped. Looked at it where it lay. It was old, the color softened and warm, edges slightly curved from having been held too many times. 2 young people standing in front of a market stall. A woman, clearly her mother, younger, the kind of young that looks almost like a different person until you find the continuous thread and then it's unmistakably the same, and beside her, a boy. Late teens, maybe 20. Laughing. His arm around the woman's shoulder with the ease of people who are comfortable in each other's presence. She looked at the boy's face. Then she picked up the photograph. She was still looking at it when her mother came through from the back. Adaora stopped. Looked at the photograph in her daughter's hands. Something in her face went very still. "Where did that come from?" she said. Her voice was controlled but stripped of its usual layers, direct, almost exposed. "It was here," Easy Eye said. "On the table." She turned it over. On the back, in handwriting she didn't recognize, 3 words in Korean and then a name. "For what remains." Joon-seo. Adaora stood without moving for a moment. Then she crossed to Easy Eye and took the photograph gently, looking at it with an expression that was not performance, that was entirely private and involuntary, the expression of someone ambushed by their own history. "Who's the boy?" Easy Eye asked, though she already knew. She needed to hear it said. "Kang," her mother said quietly. 20 years ago. He left it here." "Yes." Easy Eye looked at her mother looking at the photograph. At this woman who had come to this market to be near her dead husband and had ended up receiving, in pieces, something she hadn't known was still available. "He misses Baba too," Easy Eye said. Adaora looked up from the photograph. Her eyes were bright, not crying, not close to it. Adaora did not cry in public, and the market, even the quiet back of it, was public. But bright, in the way eyes go when something is being held at significant pressure. "Yes," she said. "I think he does. That's why he came," Easy Eye said. "Not just to watch over us. To be near someone who knew him too." Adaora looked at her daughter. Her face went through its rapid, controlled adjustment. She looked at the empty soup container on the crate. Something shifted in her expression, too small to name, too large to miss. Kang stood. The way he'd stood on the first day she'd come out. That automatic, unguarded motion. "Adaora," he said. Her name. Her full name, which no one in this market had used because no one here had known her long enough before she became simply Ezzy's mother. She stood very still. "The soup," he said. "Thank you." She looked at him. At Easy Eye. At the empty container. And then she did something that surprised everyone present, including herself. She sat down on the 3rd crate. The stall had 3 now, accumulated over the weeks without anyone formally deciding to acquire them, and she looked at Kang Joon-seo across the table of her stall, in the market where she had come to grieve and stay close to someone she had lost. "You told her," she said. "She asked," he said. "And she already knew most of it." Adaora looked at her daughter. Easy Eye met her gaze without apology. "You're too perceptive," Adaora said. "That's what he keeps saying," Easy Eye said. Something happened in Adaora's face then. The rarest thing, unexpected and involuntary. She almost smiled. Caught it. But not quite in time. Kang saw it. She looked back at him. The almost smile was gone. What remained was something older and more complicated, grief and anger and time, all compressed into the expression of a woman who has learned to hold contradictions without letting them destroy her. "He talked about you," she said quietly. "In the last year. When he knew things were getting worse. He said he wondered sometimes where you were." Kang said nothing. "He didn't say it with anger," she said, carefully, giving him something she had decided he was owed. "He said it the way you wonder about whether in a place you used to live. Distant, but not without feeling." Kang's hands, resting on his knees, pressed slightly. "I don't forgive easily," Adaora said. "I want you to know that." I know, he said. And I don't forget. I know that too. But, she paused. Long enough that the market seemed to pause with her. You kept us safe. For years. Without asking. Without announcing it. She looked at her hands. Seo Jun would have done the same if the positions were reversed. He was that kind of person. She looked back up. You learned something from him even if you went a different way. Kang held her gaze. You can keep coming, she said. The words were measured. Offered the way you offer something valuable with full awareness of what you're doing. But not as a ghost. Not as something happening in the margins. If you're here, she gestured at the crate, at the space, at her daughter and herself, then be here. A silence. You understand what I'm saying? She said. Yes, he said. Then we understand each other. She stood, straightened her wrapper, looked at it once. A look that contained 1,000 things and delivered them all in under a second, and went back through the curtain. Easy Eye looked at Kang. Kang looked at the curtain. She just gave you a second chance, Easy Eye said. I know, he said quietly. Don't waste it, she said. She doesn't give those easily either. He looked at her. I won't. Also your posture just collapsed again. He straightened. Better, she said, and went back to her fabric. If this story is doing something to you right now, if you feel it, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. The market had a different quality in the weeks that followed. Not dramatic. Not the kind of change that announces itself. The kind that you only notice when you try to remember how things were before and realize you can't quite reconstruct it. Like trying to recall the exact temperature of a room you've already left. Kang still arrived each morning at the same time. Still greeted Mrs. Your father, he said finally, was my closest friend. The word settled. Easy Eye didn't react dramatically. She sat very still, the way she went still when something important arrived and she wanted to receive it fully rather than respond before she'd processed it. For how long? She asked. From the time we were boys, he said. We grew up near here. Same neighborhood. Same school for a few years before I stopped going. The pause. He was the kind of person who made everyone around him feel steadier. Like the ground was more reliable when he was standing on it. Easy Eye was quiet. When he met your mother, Kang continued, voice lower now, careful, he changed in the way that only happens when something is exactly right. He was happy in a way I hadn't seen him be before. He stopped. I was glad for him. But something happened, Easy Eye said. I made choices, he said. The kind that closed certain doors. I couldn't be in his life anymore the way I had been. It wasn't safe. For him. For her. He looked at his hands. I stepped back. He never told me about you, I said. He wouldn't have, Kang said. By the time you were born, I was already someone different. Someone he wouldn't have wanted near his family. But you came anyway, she said. When he died. He looked at her sharply. My mother told me, she said quietly. Just now. Not everything. But enough. The pause. She was testing this, not certain. Watching his face. His face confirmed it. You came to the market after he died, she said. Not a question anymore. Once, he said. From a distance. I didn't approach her. It wasn't my place. But you kept watching, Easy Eye said. The market is your territory. You said that. A silence. Is that why you chose this territory? She asked. To stay close without being close? Kang looked at her. At this child sitting across from him with fabric in her lap and her father's eyes, he could see it now, could see Park Seo-jun in the angle of her attention, in the quality of her stillness, asking him questions that an adult twice his age would not have known to ask. You're too perceptive, he said. You keep saying that, she said. It's not a deflection that works on me. She looked at him steadily. You've been watching over us. He said nothing. That's why Lee Dong-hyun won't come back, she said. That's why the man who came to the stall that first time left without an argument. That's why this stall has never had the problems other stalls have with the people who run things around here. She paused. Because you run things around here. And you made sure we were safe. The silence between them was different now. weighted with the shape of everything that had been said. "Why didn't you just tell us?" she asked. "Because it wasn't something to tell," he said. "It was something to do quietly, without asking for anything back." Easy Eye looked at him for a very long time. "My father would have liked that," she said finally. "That you kept doing something good even when no one could see it." She paused. "I think he would have forgiven you. For whatever made you step back." Kang's jaw shifted. He looked away from her. "At the market. At nothing. The soup was good," he said after a moment. His voice was different, rougher at the edges. Under control, but only just. Easy Eye recognized this. The pivot a person makes when emotion is approaching a boundary they haven't decided to cross yet. "Tell my mother I said that," she said, letting him pivot. "She'll pretend she doesn't care. But she will." He nodded. They sat for a while after that without talking. The market moved around them. Mrs. O sold 3 ceramic pieces to a tourist. A child ran past chasing a deflated ball. Somewhere 3 stalls down, someone was arguing good-naturedly about the price of dried fish. Ordinary. But alive. Kang sat in the middle of it on an overturned crate, and for the first time in longer than he could track, did not feel like a man standing outside a window looking in. Ezzy's mother came out an hour later. She stopped when she saw Kang. "She left it here this morning before she went to the wholesale market," Easy Eye said. "She didn't say it was for you. She said she made extra." The pause. "She never makes extra." Something moved behind his eyes. "Eat," Easy Eye said, sitting across from him. "Then you can tell me what happened. Or not. Both are fine. But eat first." He opened the container. The smell of palm oil and ground melon seeds rose between them. He looked at it for a moment with the expression of someone standing at a threshold. He ate. Easy Eye watched the market and let him. She understood, in the particular emotional intelligence she'd been born with and life had sharpened, that this moment required silence more than conversation. Some things need to be received quietly or they collapse under the weight of words. He ate most of it. Set the container down. Looked at his hands for a moment. "Someone I was responsible for got hurt," he said. Easy Eye said nothing. "Listened. There are consequences to the life I've built," he continued. His voice was flat but not empty, the flatness of someone compressing something large into a small space. "I know this. I have always known this. But knowing a thing and standing in the result of it are different experiences." "Were they okay?" Easy Eye asked. "The person who got hurt? They will recover." She nodded. "And you feel responsible?" "I am responsible." "That's different from feeling it," she said. "You can know something is your fault without feeling the weight of it. The fact that you feel it means something." He looked at her. "What does it mean?" "It means you're not what people think you are," she said simply. "People who don't feel responsibility don't disappear for a week when something goes wrong. They move on. You disappeared." She tilted her head. "You went somewhere quiet and sat with it." The pause. "Something like that." "That's what my mother does," she said. "When she's carrying something heavy, she goes quiet. She doesn't perform her pain for anyone. She processes it." She looked at him carefully. "You learned that from somewhere." He said nothing. "Did your mother teach you that?" she asked. The question landed differently from the other questions she'd asked. She saw it, the slight shift, the way his face did something controlled and rapid. "My mother," he said after a moment, "died when I was young." "I'm sorry," Easy Eye said. Directly. No performance. "It was a long time ago." "Long time doesn't mean it doesn't matter," she said, echoing what she had told him before. "You taught me that." The pause. "Actually, I told you that. But it applies to you too." Despite everything, something at the corner of his mouth moved. "How young?" she asked. 11. She absorbed this. Did the quiet arithmetic. "So you've been carrying things alone since you were not much older than me." He looked at her. Said nothing. "That's a long time," she said. Not with pity. With the gravity of someone genuinely reckoning with a number. "No wonder your posture is bad." He made a sound, short, involuntary, something that in another version of him would have been a laugh. It wasn't quite that. But it was adjacent. Easy Eye noticed but didn't remark on it. She let it exist and dissolve naturally. Kang Joon-seo, she said, after a moment. Yes. Did you know my father? The question fell into the space between them like something dropped from a height. Kang's expression did three things in rapid succession, all of them controlled, all of them visible to someone paying the quality of attention Easy Eye paid. Why are you asking that? He said. Because of the way you looked when I first mentioned him, she said. And because of what my mother's face does when she looks at you. She paused. And because you came back. Every day. To sit with a child at a fabric stall. She met his eyes. People don't do that without a reason bigger than they're saying. Kang looked at her for a long time. The market moved around them. Noise and life and commerce, indifferent to the conversation happening in its middle. Her mother looked at her daughter's face, studied it the way she did sometimes, like she was reading something written there that kept changing. When I first came to this market, her mother began, I was very young. 23. I had just married your father and we were trying to build something here. This market was where we started. The pause. There were other young people around then. It was a different time. You knew Kang then, Easy Eye said. Her mother nodded slowly. He was young. 19. He worked at the market, loading, carrying, running errands. He was not yet what he became. She folded her hands on the table. He and your father were friends. The air in the small room shifted. Easy Eye absorbed this. Friends, she repeated. Close friends. For a time. Her mother's voice was careful. Even. The voice of someone narrating from a distance to stay in control. When things changed, when your father got sick, when I was struggling, Kang had already begun moving in different directions. Building the life he has now. The pause. We lost contact. People do. Circumstances pull people apart and time makes the distance permanent. She looked at her hands. I did not expect to see him here again. But he came, Tai said. He came. And you told him to leave. Her mother looked up. I told him to go, yes. Why? Because, she stopped. Started again. Because there are things from before that are better left before. Because his world is dangerous. Because you were already, she stopped again. Already attached, Easy Eye finished. Her mother said nothing, which was its own answer. Easy Eye looked at the table. Thought. In the way she thought. Not impulsively, not emotionally, but with the methodical patience of someone stacking evidence. He came back though, she said finally. Even after you told him to go. He kept coming. She looked up. Why would he do that if it was just about his friendship with Baba? Baba is gone. Her mother's jaw tightened. I don't know. I think you do. A long silence. Mama. There are things, her mother said quietly, that I have carried for a very long time. And there are reasons I carry them alone. I need you to trust that Easy Eye. Not forever. But for now. Easy Eye looked at her mother. At the careful composure of her. At the effort visible underneath it, the way you could see structure under thin fabric when light hit it right. Okay, she said. But if he's hurt, I want to know. Her mother nodded. Easy Eye went back through the curtain. She sat on her crate. Looked at the empty second crate. Looked at it for a long time. Then she picked up a piece of fabric and got back to work. He came back on the 7th day. The market was mid-morning busy when he appeared at the north entrance. He looked exactly the same, dark jacket, hands in pockets, unhurried pace. But something was different in the way he moved. Something tighter. The controlled stillness that was always his had a new edge to it, the way a surface looks after it has been repaired, same appearance, but you could feel the fracture underneath if you pressed. He greeted Mrs. O. Shorter than usual. She bowed and said nothing. He walked to the stall. Easy Eye was standing with her back to the entrance, arranging a new delivery of fabric. She heard him. Knew it was him from the particular quality of the silence that opened around his path. She finished what she was doing before she turned. He was standing at the stall. Not sitting. Standing, looking at her with something in his expression that she hadn't seen before. Something stripped back, less composed than usual. She looked at him carefully. No visible injuries. But the eyes said something had happened that left marks where marks don't show. "Sit," she said. He sat. She went to the small box under the stall where she kept things and produced a container. Set it in front of him. "Egusi soup," she said. "My mother made it this morning. It's for you." He looked at the container. Then at her. "Your mother made this for me?" A woman who was clearly her 20 years younger, standing in front of a different stall in this same market. And beside her, a boy, not quite a man yet. 19, maybe 20. Laughing. His arm around her shoulder, the way people stand when they don't know the photograph will matter later. She looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she put it back in the drawer. Pressed it shut. Went to check on her daughter. Easy Eye was asleep with a piece of fabric still in her hand, something she'd been working on before she drifted off. Her mother gently removed it. Stood there in the half-dark, looking at her child's face, the particular Nigerian sharpness of her cheekbones, and the particular Korean softness around her eyes. Two things at once. She whispered something in Igbo. A short prayer, or maybe a promise. Then she turned off the light and walked back to the kitchen where she sat for a long time saying nothing, in the particular silence of someone who is deciding how long they can let something continue before it becomes a collision they cannot control. She didn't have an answer yet. But she was beginning to understand that the clock was running. You're halfway through this story and something tells me you already know this is bigger than it looks. If this is hitting different, like it, share it, and subscribe. The next part is where everything breaks open. Enjoy. He stopped coming on a Wednesday. Not a gradual disappearance. No warning, no reduction in frequency, no farewell. Wednesday morning, the market opened, 9 o'clock came, the north entrance stayed ordinary, and the second crate sat empty with the particular emptiness of something that had been full long enough to create an expectation. Easy Eye waited until 10. Then 10:30. She sold fabric. Helped 2 customers. Reorganized the beaded necklaces by color, a task she had already done the previous week. At 11, she looked at Mrs. O's stall. Mrs. O looked back at her with an expression that was carefully neutral but carried something underneath it. The look of a woman who knew more than she was offering. Easy Eye looked away first. Her mother was in the back. Had been in the back since early morning. The curtain hadn't moved. By noon, Easy Eye accepted it. She didn't say anything dramatic to herself. She simply absorbed it the way she absorbed most difficult things. Quietly, thoroughly, filing it somewhere internal where she could examine it later when she had more information. She was good at waiting for more information. The second day without him, the market felt structurally different. Not safer, the vendors hadn't feared him for weeks now, not since they'd watched E make him pick up Mrs. O's ceramic piece on day 1. It felt thinner, somehow. Like a fabric with a thread pulled loose. Still intact. But altered. On the third day, Easy Eye was wrapping a customer's purchase when she heard 2 vendors talking 2 stalls down. They weren't being discreet. Something happened in the north end, one said. Lee Dong-hyun's people. Connected to Kang? Has to be. You don't move against Kang's territory without it coming back. Is he? Nobody knows. He hasn't been seen. Easy Eye finished wrapping the package. Handed it to the customer. Waited until the customer left. Then she walked to the curtain and pushed it aside. Her mother was sitting at the small table in the back, inventory book open but untouched, pen in her hand, not writing. She looked up when Easy Eye came in. They looked at each other. You heard, her mother said. Not a question. Is he hurt? Easy Eye asked. Her mother set the pen down. Easy Eye. Mama. Is he hurt? The pause. Her mother looked at the inventory book. Then back at her. I don't know, she said. And as I could tell, from the particular quality of her mother's stillness, from the slight tension around her eyes, that this was the truth and that the truth was costing her something to hold. You know more about him than you've told me, Easy Eye said. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, come and sit. Easy Eye sat across from her at the small table. You should eat breakfast before you come. You always arrive hungry. It makes you look heavier than you are. The day things escalated began like any other. Kang arrived. Greeted Mrs. O. Saturday. Easy Eye was in a lively mood, telling him about a legal case she had read about in a newspaper her mother brought home. She had understood perhaps 60% of it and was constructing the rest with confident logic. He listened, asked a question or two that told her he was following more carefully than his expression suggested. Then Lee Dong-hyun arrived. Lee was not one of Kang's men. He was something adjacent, the kind of man who operated in the margins of people like Kang, who moved through the same spaces but served different masters. He was in his late 30s, lean in an unhealthy way, with eyes that assessed everything as either useful or irrelevant. He came to the stall and looked at the fabrics with the theatrical interest of someone who had not come for the fabrics. "Beautiful," he said, touching the edge of an Ankara print without asking. "Nigerian work? Please don't touch the fabric without permission," Easy Eye said immediately. Lee looked at her, looked at Kang. A complicated calculation happened behind his eyes, and he smiled, the specific smile of someone who has found leverage. "Is this yours?" he said to Kang. "Cute." Kang said nothing. His hands, which had been relaxed, were still. Completely still, the way water goes still before it freezes. "I actually came to speak with the mother," Lee said, still smiling. "There's a matter of the stall's operating license. Some irregularities. Someone should look at it." "The license is current," Easy Eye said. "My mother renewed it in January. I watched her do it." "These things are complicated," Lee said pleasantly, not looking at her. Still looking at Kang. "Delivering a message through a child to a man. Sometimes the paperwork gets confused. Sometimes it needs help to stay uncomplicated." Kang stood up. The motion was slow, completely controlled. But Lee took a single step back without appearing to decide to. "The stall's license is current," Kang said. "And it will remain current. Without complication." The pause. "Is that understood?" Lee's smile thinned. "I'm just the messenger." "Then deliver a different message," Kang said. "And don't touch things that aren't yours." Lee looked at him for one more moment. Then at the stall. Then he left, walking at a pace designed to look casual. Easy Eye watched him go. Turned to Kang. "He's going to cause problems?" she said. "No," Kang said. "He won't." She looked at him. "How sure are you?" "Completely." She studied his face. Whatever she found there settled her. "Okay," she said. She sat back down. "I believe you." He remained standing for another moment, looking in the direction Lee had gone. Then he sat back down. And Easy Eye, with the seamless practicality of someone who has decided that a threat has been handled and life continues, said, "Now, the legal case I was telling you about, the defendant's lawyer made a critical error in the third submission. Do you want to hear what it was?" Kang looked at her. "Yes," he said. And he meant it. Behind the curtain, Ezzy's mother stood very still, her hand resting on a bolt of fabric, having heard every word. Her face did not show what she was feeling, but her hand pressed against the fabric with enough pressure to leave a crease. She had been trying to understand for 2 weeks why a man like Kang Joon-seo was spending his mornings with her daughter. The shape of the answer was beginning to emerge, and it frightened her more than Lee Dong-hyun ever could. That evening, after the stall was closed and Easy Eye was asleep, her mother sat at the small table in their apartment above the market street and looked at a photograph she kept in the back of a drawer. It was old. The color had softened with time, the particular fading that happens to photographs handled too much and exposed to too much light. "Two young people." "Okay," she said. "But just so you know, things that stay a long time in the dark start to grow the wrong way. My mother grew tomatoes once and kept them from the light. They went bad." The pause. "She says the same thing happens to feelings." Kang said nothing. Easy Eye handed him the chin-chin package. "Finish it," she said. "You need it more than I do today." The following week moved differently. Something had shifted in the composition of their mornings together. A degree of honesty had entered the room and rearranged the furniture. Kang still didn't speak freely, but he stopped deflecting every question quite so efficiently. He answered some things, deflected others, and occasionally he asked questions back. "What do you want to be?" he asked on a Tuesday. Easy Eye didn't hesitate. "A lawyer." "Why?" Because people like my mother need someone who speaks the language of systems, she said. She came here, she works hard, she does everything right, and people still try to cheat her. The man who owns 3 stalls down. He tried to tell her she was using space that wasn't hers. She wasn't. But she didn't know how to fight it the right way. I do. Already. I read. She looked at him. Knowledge is armor. You can take everything from someone, but if they know things, they can rebuild. Kang was quiet. That's a serious way to think at your age. I've had serious things to think about. Like what? She met his eyes. My father died when I was 4. I know what it looks like when one person is carrying everything alone. I decided a long time ago that when I'm grown, my mother will not have to carry things alone anymore. She said it the way someone states a fact about geography. Mountains are there. She will not struggle alone. Both equally fixed. Kang looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face moved, not dramatically. As he arrived at his usual time, walked through the north entrance, greeted Mrs. O, who by now had incorporated this into her morning routine with the cautious gratitude of someone receiving an unexpected gift every day, and walked to the stall. Easy Eye was rearranging fabric bolts. She didn't turn around when she heard him sit. You were gone, she said. I was. For days. Yes. She turned around. Looked at him. He looked, she thought, slightly more tired than usual. Not physically. Something behind his eyes. Did something happen? Business, he said. You don't have to tell me. She sat down across from him. But you also don't have to pretend it was nothing. Your face says it was something. He looked at her with that expression she'd catalogued over 2 weeks, the one that appeared when she said something that landed somewhere he hadn't expected. Like a knock on a door he'd forgotten existed. You're very perceptive, he said. My mother says I notice too much, she said. I think she means I notice things she wishes I wouldn't. The beat. Is she here today? Kang asked. Carefully. In the back, I said, watching him. She's always in the back on Fridays. The pause. She told me you weren't coming back. His expression didn't change. She was close to right. What made you come back? He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, I don't leave things unfinished. Easy Eye tilted her head. We're not a thing. No, he agreed. You're not. Then what are we? He looked at her. Looked at the stall. Looked at the market around them. The normalcy of it, the ordinary alive noise of it, which was somehow louder and more real in this spot than anywhere else he spent his time. I'm not sure yet, he said. That's an honest answer, she said, nodding. I appreciate that. She reached under the crate and produced a wrapped package. My mother made chin-chin last night. It's a Nigerian snack. Fried dough. Small pieces. She held it out. He looked at it. You always say no, she said. But you look like you haven't eaten anything good in 4 days, and chin-chin is very good. Just try one. A long pause. He took the package. Opened it. Put one piece in his mouth. Easy Eye watched him with the focused attention of a scientist running an experiment. He chewed, reached into the package and took another piece. Good, she said, satisfied. See? You've been refusing good things for no reason. He almost said something. Stopped. Ate another piece of chin-chin instead. Your posture has gotten worse, she observed. I've had a difficult week. Difficulty is not an excuse for collapse, she said, in a tone that suggested she was quoting someone. My mother says your body reflects your mind. If you're slouching, you're surrendering. Your mother says many things. She's been through many things, Easy Eye said simply. That's how you get wisdom. You go through things. She looked at him. What have you been through, Kang Joon-seo? You never talk about it. There's nothing to talk about. There's always something, she said. People who say there's nothing to talk about are usually the ones carrying the most. That's another thing my mother says. Your mother is very quotable. She's very wise. Easy Eye paused. Were you close with your family? The question arrived casually, the way children ask the questions that adults spend years avoiding, not because they're cruel but because they haven't yet learned that certain doors are kept closed for reasons. Kang looked at her. She held his gaze without flinching, genuinely curious, not performing anything. "No," he said. "Why not?" "It's complicated." "Most things are," she said. "Complicated doesn't mean you can't talk about it. It just means you need more words." She tilted her head. "Did something happen?" "Easy eye." He said her name quietly. Not a warning. Almost something softer. "Some things happened a long time ago and they stayed that way." She looked at him for a moment. Then nodded slowly, in a way that said she was filing this away rather than dropping it. Her eyes were sharp. She stopped when she saw Kang. Something happened in her expression that lasted less than a second. A flicker, fast as a light being switched off and on, and then it was gone, replaced by the careful neutral face of a woman who had learned to control what she showed the world. Kang stood immediately. Automatically. Not the controlled, deliberate movement he used everywhere else. He stood the way a person stands when they've been caught somewhere they shouldn't be. "Mama," his eyes said brightly, "this is Kang Joon-seo. He comes every morning. He has bad posture but he's working on it." The woman looked at Kang. Kang looked at the woman. A silence passed between them that had nothing to do with the market. "I know who he is," she said finally. Her Korean was excellent but carried the music of Igbo underneath it, like a second river running below the first. Her eyes didn't leave his face. "Mrs. Park," Kang said quietly. She said nothing. "Mama, he helped me," Easy Eye said, reading the tension with the antenna children develop in complicated households. "Last week. A man came and wasn't being respectful." "Go inside, Easy Eye." "But." "Inside. Now." Easy Eye looked between them. Whatever she saw made her comply, moving through the curtain without argument, which itself said everything about how serious her mother's voice had been. The two adults stood facing each other across the stall. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Controlled. The market is part of my territory," Kang said. "I was passing through. 14 days ago, perhaps," she said. "And the 13 days after that?" He didn't answer. Her jaw tightened almost invisibly. "She doesn't know," she said. "About you. About any of it." "I know. And you intend to keep coming." It wasn't quite a question. He didn't answer it like one. He paused. "She reminds me of someone." Something moved behind the woman's eyes. Old and complicated and too large for this conversation. "Go," she said. "Please." Kang looked at the curtain through which Easy Eye had disappeared. Then back at her. He nodded once. And walked away. Behind the curtain, Thai sat on a storage crate, holding a small piece of Ankara fabric, listening to the silence where the conversation should have been. She couldn't make out words. But she had heard a tone she didn't recognize in her mother's voice. Not anger. Not fear. Something that sounded, strangely, like grief. She turned the fabric over in her hands and waited for her mother to call her back out. The call didn't come for a long time. If you've made it this far without looking away, that means something. Hit the like button. It keeps this story alive. And if you want to see what happens next, subscribe. 3 days passed without him. The market noticed before Easy Eye did, or at least, it noticed differently. Vendors who had spent 2 weeks bracing themselves each morning slowly began to relax their shoulders around 9 o'clock, the hour Kang usually arrived. The silence that had become a strange kind of ritual simply didn't happen anymore. Mornings felt lighter. Easy Eye felt the absence like a stone in her shoe. Small enough to ignore. Impossible to forget. She didn't say anything to her mother. Her mother had not mentioned that morning, had come back through the curtain with a composed face and resumed the day as though nothing had interrupted it. Easy Eye had learned, in her 9 years of watching this woman navigate the world, that some things her mother carried alone. She had learned not to pull at threads her mother hadn't offered. But on the third morning, when 9 o'clock came and went and the second crate remained empty, Easy Eye looked at it for a long moment and then looked away. She sold 3 pieces of fabric. Helped a customer pick between 2 beaded necklaces. Reorganized the shelf she'd already reorganized twice that week. At 10:30 she looked at the crate again. "He's not coming," her mother said from behind her, not looking up from the inventory book. "I know," Easy Eye said. She went back to work. He came back on the fourth day. I looked at him with the kind of directness that children have before the world teaches them to soften their gaze. That's not a reason. That's an excuse. She gestured toward Mrs. O. She's been in this market for 30 years. She was here before most of these stalls. She deserves a greeting. Kang was silent. I'm not telling you to be her friend, Easy-Eye continued. I'm telling you to acknowledge that she exists. There's a difference. Kang stood up, walked to Mrs. O's stall, gave a short formal bow, and said good morning. Mrs. O looked like she might faint. She bowed back, hands trembling slightly, and said good morning in a voice barely above a whisper. Kang returned to his crate. Easy-Eye nodded once. Good. See? That cost you nothing. You're very opinionated for a child, Kang said. You're very obedient for a dangerous man, she replied. The silence that followed was different from the market silence. It was the silence of two people recognizing each other as something unexpected. Kang almost smiled again. Who told you I was dangerous? Nobody had to, Easy-Eye said. I watched everyone's faces when you walked in yesterday. Faces don't lie. She looked at him steadily. You're used to people being afraid of you. Most people are. I'm not. I noticed. Does that bother you? He considered the question genuinely. No, he said finally. Good, she said. Fear is boring. It makes people stupid. She finished her moi, folded the foil carefully, and set it aside. If you're going to keep coming here, you need to know the rules. Kang raised an eyebrow. 1, she said, holding up a finger. You greet Mrs. O every time. She's earned it. 2, another finger. You don't touch anything on the stall without asking. 3, if my mother comes out and you make her uncomfortable, you leave immediately, no argument. 4, she looked at him, you don't lie to me. I can tell when adults are lying. It's very obvious. They look slightly to the left and their voice changes. Kang stared at her. Do you agree? She asked. A long pause. Then, yes. Good, Easy-Eye said, and picked up a small piece of fabric to resume what appeared to be her project of decorating the edge of a stall shelf. You can stay until my mother comes out. 3 days passed. Then 4. Then a week. Every morning, Kang Joon, a man whose name made loan sharks lower their voices and whose presence had cleared entire restaurants, arrived at the market, greeted Mrs. O, and sat on a crate beside an 8-year-old girl who critiqued his posture, questioned his life choices, and occasionally offered him food he consistently refused. The market talked. Of course it did. By day 3, the story had already mutated into several versions. One version said Kang was using the girl to launder something through the stall. Another said the mother owed him money. A third, more dramatic version said he was obsessed, which people said in worried tones while secretly being fascinated. None of them were right, but no one could find the right version because the right version didn't make sense in any of their frameworks. The right version was simply that he kept coming back. On the 6th day, Hai was in the middle of telling him about a boy at her school who had tried to mock her accent. She spoke Korean with a cadence that was uniquely hers, and other children sometimes found it foreign despite her having lived here since she was 3, when 2 men appeared at the edge of the stall. They wore the kind of unremarkable clothing that people wore specifically to be unremarkable. Wrong for a market. One of them looked at Kang with the look of someone who worked for him. The other looked at Easy-Eye with the look of someone assessing a variable. Kang's posture changed. Almost imperceptibly. But Easy-Eye caught it. She stopped talking mid-sentence. Looked at the 2 men. Looked back at Kang. Friends of yours? She asked. Associates, he said. His voice was flatter now. The version of his voice he used in other parts of his life.